Hello everyone, thank you for taking the time to join us. We're just going to give it a few more minutes to let everyone come in and then we'll get started. Hi there everyone, thank you for joining us for another fantastic webinar and we're really excited about this one. There's going to allow a few seconds for everyone to join us, but in the meantime I'll just get started on the housekeeping. So for those of you who haven't joined us yet before, welcome. Please feel free to use the chat function throughout the session to introduce yourself, to share any thoughts, ideas, or let us know about any issues and we'll be happy to help you out. Please note you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to share any questions throughout the session. Please do feel free to use that and we'll get to those questions at the end. There'll also be a few live polls throughout this session. You'll see them pop up on your screen. Do get involved, do answer them and let us know if you do have any issues seeing those. Finally, for anyone that does need a transcript for today's session, you should see a little button on the bottom of your screen. You should be able to show subtitles and see subtitles for today's session as well. Sorry, thank you, Caitlin. So just a quick introduction to everyone on the call. It'll be me, Sahil and Alex from the Big Give side and Caitlin and Emily from the IG side. And just for a recap of how the campaign works, you should all now have access to your Big Give campaign page. So as long as you've accepted your offer, you should see your campaign page and you can see a little View My Campaign Page button on the side of your campaign dashboard in the portal. So you can have a look at the link and start sharing that. In regards to the links for your Big Give campaign page, unfortunately, you're not able to change or edit these. However, you can use sites like Bitly to shorten or customize the URL, particularly for this session if you're looking to share your campaign page on your socials. In regards to assets, obviously, we know that this campaign, we haven't had as much time as we would have kind of liked in terms of planning the campaign, but we do have lots of assets available in your charity portal if you do want to make use of those. If you go to your dashboard, you should see a little support section. Under the Women and Girls Match Fund, you should find all of these resources, including a social media guide with logos, templates, and also editable templates for Canva that you can personalize for your charity. In regards to pixels, unfortunately, we can't support pixels for your Big Give campaign pages. So if you're using paid ads, you won't be able to do that directly for your Big Give campaign page. However, some charities who have used pixels before and paid ads have set up a little campaign button on their own website and have linked the pixels there. So possibly something for you to look into. You could link people directly to your website and then have a button on your website that links people again to your Big Give campaign page. And finally, I would just say about updating your campaign page. You want to make sure all of your links are up to date for your supporters during that campaign week. If you go to account and under details, you should see all of your links, include your website, your social URLs. You should make sure these are all up to date so that all your supporters can access these during the campaign. If for any reason you can't see your campaign page at the moment, it may be because you haven't updated your payment details on the Big Give yet. So please do make sure we have all of your payment details. And if you have any questions or you're unsure, just pop us an email at hello@thebiggive.org.uk and we can help you out with that. And with that, I'll pass straight on to Caitlin and Emily.
Hi everyone, welcome to the session. Thanks so much for joining us. Probably a lot of you are already very familiar with us by now, but for anyone new, we are IG advisors. We're a strategy consultancy and we work with philanthropy, businesses, nonprofits for social and environmental change. I'm Caitlin. I'm a junior advisor. A lot of you will be very, very familiar with my face and my voice by now. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Emily. I don't know if you'd like to quickly introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I'm the Chief Exec at IG Advisors, and I'm super excited to be working on this campaign. So you'll be hearing from me a little bit later on in the session.
Okay, so everyone will be very familiar with the training structure by now, but just a reminder that tomorrow we have Ask the Panel. That's going to be a really exciting session where we'll get a chance to hear from past challenge participants. And also don't forget to join us in March after your campaign ends for some reflection time and tips on donor cultivation after the campaign. So in terms of today's session, we're going to be talking about communication channels and social media. So we're going to start off by looking at the objectives for the session. We're going to do a quick icebreaker because we love for these sessions to be really interactive. We love hearing from you in the chat, as you will already know by now. We're then going to have a quick introduction to key communication channels. We're going to do a deep dive into social media for the campaign, and then we're going to look at some example creative uses of social media and end with a Q&A. Just a reminder that if at any point we're going too fast, please do feel free to let us know in the chat. We will be sharing the recording and the decks with everyone. But also we know that the transcript sometimes can't keep up with us. So if there are any gaps in today's session, but also in past sessions or future sessions, you have our email addresses. So please do reach out to us and we will very happily fill in any gaps. So today we're going to, first of all, understand the do's and don'ts of key campaign communication channels. And we're going to learn how to leverage social media platforms for fundraising success. But before we kick everything off, as always, we would like to hear how you're feeling. So how comfortable are you with using social media for fundraising at the moment? And there should be a poll that appears on screen shortly. Here we go. So are you not comfortable at all? Please help. Or are you feeling really confident and you're ready to go? Just a couple of seconds. And then maybe we can see the results. Okay, so quite a mix. Which is good. We definitely have something for everyone. So we're covering the basics, but we've also got some interesting deeper insights for today. So useful to know where everyone's at. So we want to encourage everyone to feel comfortable using the chat and interacting with us. So we're starting with a quick icebreaker. And we call this Complete the Tweet. So right and wrong answers are welcome in the chat. You just have to complete these tweets. So the first ever tweet was shared in 2006, just setting up my what? Guesses, suggestions, welcome in the chat. They don't have to be correct. Just setting up my Twitter account, a lot of guesses, just setting up my Twitter, my profile, everyone very spot on. So the answer is just setting up my Twitter, but it was misspelt, which I guess gives us hope in a way. The bar is set low if these tweets can generate so much engagement. So the second round, one of the most popular tweets ever was posted in 2020. Congratulations to the astronauts that left Earth today. What comes next? Guesses in the chat. Lots of very creative guesses. Good luck. Ooh, a hashtag, fly me to the moon. That's very creative. So yeah, the answer was good choice. One of my favorites. And then very quickly, finally, the second most liked tweet of 2021 came from Twitter. And Twitter said, hello, what? We have a suggestion, hello world. Hello again. Hello all, hello tweeters. Everyone very much, very close to the target. So hello, literally everyone. So yeah, thank you for taking part in that icebreaker. We love that. Hello, is it me you're looking for? I love that. So that was just to get you all engaged in the chat. We love hearing from you. So please do speak to us. So communication channels. We have already looked in our past training sessions at creating messaging. So now we have that messaging, we need to use our communication channels to share it with the world. We've included some example channels on this slide, but one important point to note is that obviously this is digital fundraising. So a lot of our communications are going to be using online channels, but we can still use offline. So we can still use in-person events where appropriate, face-to-face, but we always want to be directing people online back to our campaign pages to donate. So one of the things that can be really helpful when we're thinking about spreading our message and using our channels is reflecting on what's worked well for us in the past and what maybe isn't so useful an approach. So we would like to spend just a couple of minutes. We would love for you to choose one of these communication channels. So either social media, website, email, and we would love for you to let us know what has worked well and what has not worked well for you using one of these channels. And please do share with us in the chat. So a minute or two to reflect on what we've learned in the past. So for example, maybe you found on social media that thanking your supporters publicly has been a really nice touch. Maybe you found on your website that when you don't use bolding and infographics, it's too overwhelming for your website users. Also, someone has found that memes have been really useful on social media. A lot of people, so yeah, a lot of people sharing some good tips around using visuals on social media, remembering to use your hyperlinks. And that's going to be really important for this campaign because we want to direct everyone to our pages to donate. Reaching out to influencers is really, really useful. Keeping your emails personalized. So definitely, we really want to make things easy for ourselves by using as many templates and copy bank text as possible. But if we can personalize that and tailor that, it's going to make it feel so much more special and meaningful to the people we're communicating with. So yeah, a lot about personalizing and using visuals. Some really, really great tips there, and lots about all 3 channels. So that's really useful. Thank you everyone for sharing those. We have included our own list of do's and don'ts, which we're not going to go into now, and it's definitely not exhaustive. But just to help you start thinking about tailoring your approach depending on the channel you're using. So we've reflected on what works well on different channels, but another thing that some of us might be thinking about is advertising. So advertising is how we promote our brands, it's how we promote our campaign, and there are 2 main types. So organic advertising is all about using free mechanisms and channels. So for example, your typical unpaid social media posts. Paid advertising obviously costs money, but it can expand our reach. So we're not just speaking to our followers or people who are viewing our hashtags. We can reach new audiences. Now, please don't feel like you have to use paid adverts for this campaign. In some instances, they work really well, but in some instances, they might not. So even though you can reach a large amount of people, they need to be really well targeted to actually reach people who are going to take action and donate or subscribe or visit your website or whatever your goals are. And there are tools like Facebook ads, you can do sponsored Twitter posts, but there are also platforms like Google Ads and Ad Grants, which is for nonprofits specifically. So just for anyone who was interested in understanding advertisements, some information and tools to consider there. But obviously today, the focus of our session is on social media. Obviously, this is something we all know, but worth remembering, there are so many channels for us to be considering. There's Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok. But we really want to make sure that everything is underpinned by a solid social media strategy. And Emily is going to be helping us to understand a bit better some of the key things we should be thinking about when it comes to this. But we should really be making sure that our social media objectives and ambitions are aligned with those wider overarching campaign ambitions. And we also need to be thinking about both how to be proactive, so us actively sharing and producing content, but also being reactive. So engaging with content, replying to comments and likes, picking up on trends and jumping on those as they appear. And this is all ideas that we're going to dive into a bit deeper later on. So before we move on to our deep dive, just a little quiz to test our social media knowledge. So let us know in the chat box, what % of UK adults have a social media account? A 70, B 60, C 45%. Seeing a lot of very accurate guesses. So the answer is 70%. So social media is a great platform to reach a mass audience. Question 2, there are 48.5 million Facebook users in the UK, but what percentage of the UK population is using the platform on a daily basis? So 44%, 34%, or 24%. Seeing lots of very spot on answers. So the answer is 44%, which is quite interesting. So something for us to bear in mind is that there's a difference between a user and an active user. So we're gonna, for the sake of time, just skip to summarize some key points. So social media is great for crowdfunding because crowdfunding is all about mass audiences and we can get that wider reach. But also, there's, as we said, a difference between being a user and actively engaging. So when you're selecting your social media platforms, we really recommend using the platforms where you're already getting a good amount of engagement, because that's going to be your lowest hanging fruit. And it is important to focus on just a couple of platforms, particularly if you're a small team. So by looking at where you're getting engagement, that's going to help you work out how to prioritize. So something to keep in mind. And with that, I'm going to pass on to Emily, our social media expert, who's going to go a whole lot deeper into all of this. So over to you.
Thank you, Caitlin. So just to reiterate what was said at the beginning, please do say in the chat if the transcript isn't picking up what I'm saying properly. I do have a weird accent and a tendency to talk quite fast, so I'm going to try and work on that, but do flag if you can't hear what I'm saying or understand what I'm saying. So as Caitlin said, the most important thing with using social media of any kind is really intentionally planning your approach. Social media is so accessible to all of us. We can jump on and do it anytime, which means that sometimes it can take up your whole day without it necessarily achieving the impact that you want it to. So being really intentional and planning your approach is really key to getting the most success and the best use of your time as well. So when it comes to thinking about clarifying your ambitions for the use of social media, in this case, obviously driving attention to your campaign and getting people to donate, but also just in general, clarifying your ambitions, setting your goals, and thinking about what kind of resources you have to apply to social media, and thinking about your audiences. All of those things, many of you will have seen addressed in session 1, and there's recordings available for that. So we're not going to go too deep into those, but those are obviously all of the stepping stones and the foundations that you need to get to the next parts. When you're thinking about your social media strategy specifically, it needs to be in alignment with your broader campaign strategy. So if you have kind of wider ambitions for the campaign, obviously money raising, but other things like raising brand awareness or educating your audiences on the particulars of why your approach is most important, thinking about your core messages, the things that you want people to take away from having seen your content, you need to think about how your social media use aligns with those kind of broader strategies. In some cases, it might be completely overlapped, i.e. they're one and the same, but sometimes they might be slightly different. You might need to make something slightly more accessible to a particular audience on a particular platform, which leads me on to speaking more specifically about knowing your audiences. This is about knowing them for your messaging, but also about choosing your platforms, because your audiences, the people who care about your work or should care about your work, the ones that you want to be engaging with your campaign, they might not all be in the same place, and they might not all be behaving the same way in each of those platforms either. So really having a sense of who your audiences are. Age is a really good kind of proxy for deciding this, but also so is connection to certain hobbies or interests. That will define which platform they're most likely to be using, and also where they will be most engaged with your content. So you might have a wonderful Instagram page, for example, but if your work isn't very visually rich or kind of easy to represent visually, then you might not get a lot of engagement from your donors or your audiences there. So thinking about your platforms is really about not just who's there, but how they're engaging and what it is that makes them take action, because eyeballs are just one part of the equation. You need people to actually click and then obviously reach into their pockets for you as well. In general, as Caitlin said, it can be better to focus on one or two platforms where you do it really well, rather than trying to spread yourself thin over all of the platforms that are available. And that's best for your resources, your internal staff resources and time, but it's also best for your content, because you do need to tailor your content for each platform. And so you just constantly be reproducing everything if you were switching too often. And then thinking about the way in which you engage and the content that you're going to be posting is something that you don't have to be doing during the campaign. It's something that you can think about ahead of time and make sure that you kind of got the framework there so that when you're in the throes of the campaign and kind of incredibly busy, you can be more responsive during the campaign because you've got your engagement strategy and your content already planned out. So thinking about drafting things beforehand, scheduling posts beforehand, and then also making sure that your content across all the different platforms and channels is aligned and consistent with the overall campaign. So you don't want to be sending people somewhere from one platform and somewhere else from another, or kind of clashing on timing between the two things either. If you go on to the next slide for me, Caitlin. Thank you. So thinking specifically about knowing the platform, as I said, it's really good and efficient to repurpose content as much as possible. You don't want to be reinventing the wheel every time you're moving onto a different platform, but different platforms do call for slightly different approaches. So you need to make sure that you're tailoring it as well. There's no point in just kind of print screening a tweet and then putting it on Instagram or just posting an image on Twitter without any kind of words or hashtags accompanying it. There's different strategies that you need to tailor in each. And so the things to consider here are obviously what it is that you're posting, when you post, because your audiences might be most active and most engaged at different times of day and different days of the week during the campaign on different platforms. A lot of people tend to spend time on Instagram in the evenings, for example, whereas Twitter, they tend to spend it on the day. That's an average. That might not be true for your audience. So you need to use data to make those decisions for you. Thinking about who you're targeting is obviously something that will decide which platform you're on, but then also what you post and when you post. How much you're writing is always a key. Some platforms have limits, some don't. Some readers have very short attention spans, others don't. So thinking about kind of how much you're writing, and then also how you're engaging with people, because some platforms really lend themselves to conversation, sharing a question and perhaps going back and forth about it, or sharing video content that invites comments and participation. And others might just be kind of a signal, hey, come and look at this thing. So thinking about the practice of engaging and how much time you're dedicating to that is really important. So some of these questions you can answer based on data you already have from your social media use and your profiles. Some of it you might need to experiment. So you might need to try something on day one, and if you're not getting the response you anticipated, try something different on day two and kind of compare and contrast what it is that's working and what it is that isn't. So using data is really important for all of those decisions. Next, thank you. So we're probably all familiar with Twitter, but just in case anyone isn't, it's a social media platform. Its focus is on kind of short, we used to call it microblogging, kind of short announcements, things that are trending. So kind of looking at what everybody else is talking about and current affairs. The posts are now limited to 280 characters. It used to be 140. So we've got a little bit more space now. And in those posts, you can incorporate links, media, emojis, hashtags, and you can also tag other accounts. On Twitter, the name of the game is short and snappy. No one really engages very well with really, really lengthy tweets. And the most successful posts, the ones that get the most engagement, are ones that include visual elements. So animated GIFs, images, infographics. It's not as visual focused as other platforms like Instagram, but posts that have something kind of interesting in them are easier to see in the feed and get greater engagement from your audiences. The tip on this platform is to include 1 or 2 relevant hashtags, and that will improve the reach of your post. So it won't just go to your followers when you post it, it will go to people on those hashtags or who are following or engaging on those hashtags. And that will kind of label your content for you as well. So when people are going through your feed or seeing your content in the feed, they'll have a sense of what it's about without necessarily reading it, and that will improve their engagement if they are interested. On your profile itself, you can also pin important tweets. So for example, if you've got one tweet that's kind of naming what the campaign is, where people should go, the tweet that's describing your campaign, you can pin that at the top of your profile. So if someone goes to your profile from any other content, they will see that first of all, and it will help to drive more engagement and traffic to what that tweet is asking of people. Twitter is largely millennial audiences. So 25 to 34-year-olds make up about 29% of the platform's users. And it's also a very fast moving platform. So it's used to kind of react to what's happening, see what's trending and what other people are talking about. Half of the engagement that a tweet generates will occur in the first 30 minutes. So it's a very kind of fast moving platform. And the kind of engagements that people can take with your content on there are to retweet, so kind of signal boost to their audiences, their followers, followers. That's a key action that you can ask of people, especially influencers who have big followings. And they can also like and reply to the posts on there as well. So all of those things count as engagement and will feed into your engagement statistics on Twitter. Next, Facebook, which we're probably all also familiar with, but as we know, it's a platform that's designed to enable people to connect with each other, stay in touch with friends and family and other groups, but it also does have a big kind of corporate component to it, or kind of organizational component to it. So pages on there where people kind of use as the place to go and the community around their organization and their work. There are no character limits on Facebook, so you can post very long form content if you want to, and you can also include images, emojis and videos and tag other users as well. Successful posts on Facebook do tend to include photos and image content, so those things are prioritized in the feed. And they also do offer live stream functionality, so you can kind of interact with your audiences in real time. It can be a useful tool if you have a way to kind of more personally engage with supporters, maybe have a leader from your organization taking questions, or in some cases, perhaps a client that you're working with, if that's appropriate, or live events, live fundraising campaign events can work well on Facebook as well. It offers donate buttons, so charity pages can add donate buttons to their page to kind of invite immediate action from the platform. And it's also useful for peer-to-peer fundraising. So allowing your staff, volunteers and supporters to kind of themselves be fundraising on your behalf. So that's what the platform is very effective for. And then in terms of engagement, there's like and reply, and the like has a few different kind of reactions that sit underneath it on Facebook as well. So people can say whether they love something or whether they found it funny through the use of that engagement button. Next page. Thank you, Caitlin. So finally, just going to talk about Instagram. So Instagram is a very visual platform. It allows users to kind of follow friends and influencers and organizations that they admire, and the content is all visual, so kind of images and videos. It's been heavily influenced by TikTok, so it has a lot of more long form kind of video content on there now, as well as stories, but it's all kind of very, very visual. It's really important on this platform to use relevant hashtags so that your posts appear in more places than just your feed to your followers. And the story content that you share on Instagram has a limited time window on it. So it's up for 24 hours and then it disappears. But you can share kind of videos on your main feed if you want them to be there for longer. It's a really great tool for generating a sense of urgency, so towards a campaign goal, but also careful not to over post on your main feed. So there's a balance in kind of engaging your audiences in the right way, and stories are usually the way to do that in a less kind of pressured way. There's lots of influencers on this platform. So a lot of people with really big followings that tend to leverage their kind of personal brand and their personality to signal boost organizations, brands, products that they like. They obviously do that for a fee oftentimes, but for charities, if you build the right kind of relationship, they can do it for free. One other thing that people often do on Instagram is takeovers as well. So this is allowing an influencer or a volunteer or a service user to take over your account and post their own content for a limited amount of time. And it's something that can drive engagement from the audiences of those people, but also just generate new and interesting content, perhaps kind of a behind the scenes view of something that people wouldn't usually be getting online. It's very good for the visual content and kind of challenges that are kind of video based or image based, but it's not good for kind of long form written content. So just something to think about when using that platform. Next slide. Thank you. So I saw in the chat a couple of people mentioning that what's worked well for them is engaging with influencers, and I'm glad to hear that. As I just mentioned, Instagram's a good place for this, but influencers exist on every platform. So there's a couple of kind of tips here of how to go about identifying and building those kind of relationships for success. So the first thing is mapping your network, and that can be who you already have existing connections with, but also who it is that is kind of aligned with what you're doing. So they might not be someone you know, but they're someone who posts a lot of content that's relevant to your work or adjacent to the type of topics that your work focuses on. Obviously, people who are focusing on kind of women's rights issues, or who are usually quite outspoken around social justice concepts, those things can be easier to identify. But also sometimes people who have like a particular, I don't know, there's been a number of beauty influencers that have done a lot of work on gender-based violence, for example, or other kind of products that can be seen as aligned to that. So thinking creatively about who's in your network or who's already moving in your topic online can be a useful way to think about finding influencers that are relevant to you. Thinking about your alignment, which is kind of what I just suggested. Some things are really, really obvious, like they're already passionate about women and girls, but some things can be a bit more creative as well, a little bit more tangential. It's thinking about, would you be proud to have them represent you? And also, would they be proud to represent your organization? So that's the kind of the key magic at the middle of what we describe as alignment there. And the most important thing is to focus on engagement. So it's easy to think about influencers, people who have kind of 100,000 followers, and you need to get to as many people as possible. But actually, if you could find someone who just has a really, really dedicated following that are really highly engaged, that might be a better way for you to get what you want, which is for people to commit to your organization and take action on your behalf. So you don't need to think about like celebrities online. It's just thinking about what counts as an influencer in your space, in your circles, and what will get the most engagement, rather than just the number of eyeballs on your content. And then when building a relationship with them, it's important to think about what their motivations are. So would it be that they want to be acknowledged as being part of your campaign on your socials? Is it that you want to form a community of influencers that are working with you and kind of help them to connect with others? Would they be interested in learning more about your work, and so you could share insights and your sector expertise with them? Is it that they have a personal experience of what it is that you're doing, and so they want to kind of have a platform to engage with that subject? Thinking about their motivations is the key to kind of building that rapport and that relationship with them. And then finally, just making their job as easy as possible. So sharing the tools and resources, draft copy, social media assets and images, just everything they could possibly need to just press send on what you need them to post, rather than expecting them to kind of make it up themselves, because that can be something that they either won't do or they'll take a really long time to do. And obviously, when you have a time-pressured campaign, that's something that can be quite challenging. Next slide, thank you. So obviously this campaign is a real moment, right? Part of the value of this is not just that there's match funds available and that there'll be kind of people interested in your work, but that also the moment itself is going to create a buzz online. So there's a couple of key things that are really important to do to be able to leverage that moment when everybody's kind of going to be talking about this, and there'll be a lot of new people engaging. So the first thing is to always use the hashtags and mention the relevant organizations. So hashtag Match Her Dream, it's International Women's Day, obviously, so using the International Women's Day hashtag, making sure you're tagging Big Give, because all of the kind of buzz will be around the campaign itself as led by Big Give, but there might be also others that it's useful for you to tag, your leaders, your volunteers, your influencers. So making sure that wherever you're putting out content, you're appropriately connecting that to the people and hashtags that will have the most activity around this campaign and related topics. Making sure you're updating your supporters and your audiences daily. So how much money have you raised so far? How far are you away from your target? Although one tip on that is not to start sharing how you're doing towards your target until you actually do have progress to share, because sometimes people get a little bit nervous about supporting campaigns that don't have any support yet. So it can be useful to just wait until you actually have some good news to share, because people like to back a winning horse, so to speak. And then during the campaign, it's very important to be reactive as well. So where you have people engaging with your content or asking questions or perhaps sharing your content, making sure you're getting involved in those conversations, engaging in the discussions that are happening, but also just thanking people for engaging, so that you're kind of ever present in their feeds and that you're front of mind for your audiences and beyond. And then also there's opportunity to get creative, right? To think about inviting your followers to do something other than, or in addition to just giving to the campaign. So a challenge that they might participate in to kind of signal boost or promote that you're doing this campaign, and things that can be useful for them to take part in or interesting for them to take part in as a community. So if you could go on to the next slide, Caitlin. Thank you. I just want to do a quick exercise with you all. So we've obviously got the campaign hashtag, but I would love to hear from you, and give you a few minutes to think about this. What hashtag would you like to be using for your campaign specifically? So thinking about your organization being part of this campaign, what is the thing that speaks to what it is that you want people to understand from your hashtag? And it's really important, obviously, that it's short and sweet, so it can't be taking up all of the space in your post. Making sure it doesn't have any spaces in it, so it needs to be something that's like easily readable with capital letters on the beginning of each word. And it's also useful for it to be able to kind of speak for itself, right? Be action oriented, or be something that kind of really brings to life what it is you do, or what it is you want people to care about or know about you. So interested to just hear from you in the chat over the next kind of minute or so, what hashtags come to mind, and be really creative. This doesn't have to be your final hashtag. It can be funny if you want it to be, as well as kind of meaningful and serious. And I think that's come to mind through the planning you've already done, or through some of the discussions we've had so far today. So yeah, just pop them in the chat when you've had a second to think. So already getting some good ones through. So hashtag unlock her success. Hashtag smash stereotypes. I like it. Fund her future. She inspired me. I like that. That's really nice. So this is the power of a good hashtag. You know, that doesn't tell me all the details about you or your organization or what you're doing, but it's made me feel something. You know, it says everything it needs to, just in those kind of 3 little words. Dream high. I like that one. 2 little words there. That's even more impressive, more succinct. Find her potential. Raise her up. She can. I love these. See, getting goosebumps already. So this is some really amazing thinking. Happy babies on board. I like that one. Although, just to repeat, really important to make use of both uppercase and lowercase letters, just so people can easily read the hashtag. And also for people who use screen readers in order to read content online, if it's all in caps or it's all in lowercase, then the screen reader struggles to separate the words. So they'll just kind of read out the letters rather than the words. Life of giving. Inspiring freedom. From despair to hope. These are great. I don't think you guys need our help. This is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those. I think one thing just to highlight here is the example that we put at the bottom, which is kind of what not to do. So it's hashtag women and girls space match fund. So that's all wrong. The hashtag won't join up on all the platforms. It won't come through as one hashtag. And then also not a good use of lowercase and capital letters in order to make it more readable for people. Okay, next slide, Caitlin. Thank you. So when thinking about distributing content, getting it out there, all the kind of tools and processes that you need in place to just plan and schedule and deliver. Firstly, you want to make sure that you're using something to keep on brand and be consistent. And you can use a number of different tools to kind of plan and also see your content across different channels. So Hootsuite is a really popular one, Content Cal as well. It allows you to kind of schedule and plan your content and see how it's kind of relating to itself across different channels, and also kind of copy content from one platform to another and then tailor it. Sharing personal stories is really, really effective. So focusing on people and their stories is the most engaged with content on social media. Case studies, quotes from people, and as we mentioned before, kind of social media takeovers on the part of service users or volunteers or staff as well. If you have a short time frame for your campaign, like we do, you want to be pushing out content really regularly. You want to make sure that you're sharing maybe kind of upwards of 3 times a day on your platforms, and updating people on progress towards your target daily. And when you're not sharing your own content, kind of reacting to other people's as well, so that the algorithm recognizes you as being very active, and therefore is kind of signal boosting your content for you as well. So making sure that you are planning to share more regularly than you otherwise would during this campaign period. And also thinking about empowering your staff and volunteers to post for you as well. So encourage them and inspire them in general, but also make their lives easier, give them draft copy, images to share, just like you would with influencers, and maybe run like a quick briefing or kind of training session for them if they need that support. And that's something that can mean that it's not just you and your official social media accounts that are responsible for signal boosting this campaign. And it will also help to create buzz in the right circles, right? People will start to think, oh, everyone's talking about this, and that will help to build momentum for your campaign. And I know at the beginning, Bethany mentioned that Big Give has Canva templates that you can use relative to this specific campaign, but there are a number of other resources like Pictochart and Unsplash that you can use to seek source images if you don't have your own. And then also, as Bethany mentioned, Bitly is good for shortening hyperlinks for your campaign pages, but then also tailoring those, so kind of adding your own organization name or brand or hashtag to the end of that, so that it's kind of more personal when you're sharing those links. And then finally, I mentioned this before around the importance of using data and making sure that where you're making decisions about what works or where your audiences are or how they're going to engage, that you're doing that based on data. Most social media platforms have built-in data collection tools. So you don't really even need to use third-party analytics to do this anymore. You can just look at what's working on a daily basis during the campaign. But it's also important to do it before. So kind of understanding what works for your audiences before you plan your content, and then during, so that you can pivot and kind of change your content the next day if something isn't working properly. And the key things to look at are like, where are people following you? Where do they most interact with you? When and how do they interact? And what is it that you really want from them? You want them to be replying or sharing or whatever. Instructing them to do that also in response to where you can see holes in your data. It's like, we need more people to be doing this. Just asking people, please share this, or please like this if you agree, or, you know, those kind of interactions. You can literally ask your followers for them. And then thinking about what it is that gets engagement of your content. What are people most responsive to? Is it images? Is it questions? Is it discussion topics? Is it personal stories? Try doing more of those and see where it gets you. Are there any trends in general? And then obviously we want to be looking at this data post campaign and reflect on that, but we'll have a whole other session for that and more time for that another time. Okay, I know I'm running over time. So next slide, Caitlin. Is this the end of my section? It is. Okay, I'm going to hand back over to Caitlin, but thank you very much for listening to me.
Thanks so much, Emily. And I also love all those hashtag ideas. They're great. We've included some example creative ideas in the deck. We're going to run through them very, very quickly because we want to leave time for your answering any of your questions at the end. But just highlighting the ALS Association Ice Bucket Challenge. We're probably all familiar with it. People were encouraged to take to social media, share videos pouring ice cold water over themselves, and then donate and challenge their friends to do the same. And this was really effective, and we want to break down some of the reasons why. So first of all, it was raising both money and awareness for the organization. It was very sustainable. So as it picked up momentum, because people were challenging other people who were then in turn challenging other people, in the end, it just ended up running itself. So for anyone thinking about capacity issues, it's an interesting case study. They were leveraging their supporters' networks by asking them to challenge each other, and they were creating this community spirit. So you wanted to be invited to take part in support. And it was also very visual with videos, which is perfect for a lot of social media platforms that we've looked at today. And the perfect type of content for getting likes and comments and expanding the reach of posts. And then the second example we've included is an example of a takeover. So Kids in Museums, they're a UK charity and they promote family-friendly museums. And they run a takeover day where they encourage museums to let young people take over their social media. And in 2021, their tweets reached 2 million people. And it's a really nice example of a creative way of amplifying voices, stories, sharing new content. And it works really well because there's a clear purpose. So if we're doing a takeover, we need to know what the end goal of that's going to be. It should be a set duration. So it could be a morning, an afternoon, a lunchtime, but that's going to make it feel really exciting and exclusive and special. Kids in Museums also provided support. So they provided cues and guidance about the type of content to be shared during these takeovers. And it's also nice to think about how to make the takeover mutually beneficial. And also it leveraged the organization's networks, it expanded reach, and it included really interesting voices and perspectives. So we do recommend doing some research into those case studies. They're really interesting. So we're going to move on to the Q&A section. we've already got some questions in the Q&A box, which is great. But if you do have any other questions, please do feel free to add them to the little Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So we have a question for the Big Give. Someone is able to see their campaign page, but they can't edit it. So how can they edit their campaign page?
Yeah, so you just need to log into the portal, and if you go to your Women and Girls dashboard, you should see a little media button, and you can edit all of the pictures and media and quotes on your campaign page. You won't have access to edit the text on your campaign page at this stage, but if there are any, small bits of grammar that you need to update or typos or anything, you can send that over to us and we can update that for you. So just pop us an email and we can help you with that.
Thanks so much, Beth. The next question is about return on investment if paid advertising goes well. Emily, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sure. I think perhaps Big Give might have more data on this, but in general, so the question was, what kind of return on investment should we be expecting if we do paid advertising? Well, would you be expecting UK charities to bring in more than we spend? So overarching answer, yes, you should only ever do paid advertising if it's going to bring in more than you're spending. Otherwise, it's obviously a waste of money, much more than you're spending, I would say. Sometimes you can have a reason for doing paid advertising that's not about fundraising and it's worth spending money on. For example, trying to get people to sign a petition or trying to raise brand awareness. So there are reasons that you might spend money on paid advertising that aren't about literally transactional ROI, but general analysis, and this is kind of like global internet analysis, it's not specific to the UK, is that non-profit groups usually invest about 12 pence for every £1 they raise on paid advertising. That's obviously hugely varied across the sector, but in general, that's kind of the average. And you want to try and get that difference as big as possible. So thinking about that in terms of like a funnel. So if you've got your advertising, how many people are going to click? That's kind of what you pay for. And then how many people are then going to take action that you want once they get to the campaign page or to your website, in the case of you using a pixel on your website, and thinking about what it's worth for you to, what the success rate's going to be at each of those stages, and therefore what it's worth for you to pay for clicks up here so that you get however many donors you need to achieve your goal. And obviously that's related to the amount that you're asking people to donate as well, or you're trying to nudge people to donate. So it's a little bit of a moving target, and it could be a whole training in itself. But yes, 12 pence for every £1 is the average.
Thanks, Emily. So we have a question about establishing what platforms target audiences are using. So how do you know, for example, what platforms 35 to 40-year-old mothers are using? So there's definitely research that you can do. There are statistics out there around demographics on different social media platforms. It also might be a case of having a look yourself at the kind of different types of followers that you have on different platforms, and who's interacting with you where. I don't know if you have any tips you'd add to that, Emily.
No, I think that's right. I think there's the two ways of approaching it is basically the data you already have, i.e. look in your analytics for Instagram, look in your analytics for Twitter, and know what are the demographics of your current audience. And it might be the exact audience you want, or it might be that you're reaching people that you don't want to reach, and so you've got a gap that you need to fill. And then start looking at the analytics, all the kind of trends and analysis for the platforms themselves. So there's a lot of reports out that as Caitlin says, they'll just say on average most users on this platform are young, or they're mostly women, or whatever. But your part of that platform is the most kind of data rich part for you. So using your analytics is the right place to start.
Yeah, that's really great. Thanks, Emily. So we have someone saying that their campaign target is ambitious, and should they avoid using this at the beginning of the campaign because they're worried about not seeming successful. So one thing that I would say is, as Emily mentioned earlier, there's a difference between sharing your campaign target and sharing your progress towards that target. So definitely, if you don't have many donations coming through, maybe wait a bit before you start sharing your progress. But I don't know, Emily, if you have any advice on this.
Yeah, so this is a really good question, and there's lots of pros and cons depending on your audience and the type of people you're engaging. I would say with a matched fund campaign that it's not necessarily about we have to get to the target. It's about stressing the urgency and the opportunity of anything you give now will be matched. And so naming your overall target isn't the same kind of risk as it might be with just a general crowdfunding campaign, where it's like, if we don't get that, then the crowdfunding campaign has failed. I think it really does depend on your audience as well. So sometimes, just to reiterate, don't say you haven't got any donations, but once you've got some donations and you have some progress to share, that there can be a risk to not meeting your target if you've like really galvanized people for this one and only opportunity, and you really want to kind of show meaningful progress, and then maybe talk about, oh, we've done so well, thank you, we're so well that we're going to extend our target, and kind of that kind of messaging. But you do need a clear reason for doing that, right? If you're saying, oh, we need 10,000 to do X, and then you reach 10,000 and you start talking about 20,000 all of a sudden, then you need a reason to kind of re-galvanize people then. So there are risks and opportunities to kind of both approaches, and it really does depend on the things that you're focusing on with your audience, and also what you know about your donors. If you're saying this is your one and only chance to unlock this money for us, and that's your kind of urgency, then I would say just go for the ambitious target. Don't be shy of being ambitious. But if you do have something that you can talk about, this is why we're extending, and therefore you will have unlocked this other great thing for us, then it can be something that's an opportunity for your audiences as well.
Thanks so much, Emily. So we have a question for the Big Give / feedback. Is there a reason that it isn't possible to edit campaign overviews? Because it could be very helpful.
Yeah, so at the moment, you may have noticed that some of the text from your campaign page is taken directly from your application that you submitted when you first applied to the Women and Girls Match Fund. This is just simply because we don't want any changes to the project at this stage. But of course, if you do want to edit some wording, that's absolutely fine. Just let us know and we can do the updates for you essentially. But that's the main reason why we don't have the text function available after you've been accepted in the campaign.
Thanks, Beth. And then we have a final question. So since donations for the Match Fund only count if donors use the Big Give platform, is it possible to get a redirect link and replace donate buttons on participants' websites with Big Give donate click-through links? Beth, I don't know what your experience is and how people work around that normally.
So I think I understand the question, but I believe we've had a few charities before who've directed people to their own website, and then their donate button on their website or other buttons on their website will then direct them straight to the Big Give campaign page. So you can do that, and you can use the link on your page to do that if you want to.
Okay, and then a final question has just come through. If we have no idea how to post social media items, is there any kind of further help available?
Well, firstly, I would say definitely make use of reviewing this webinar again and having a look at our marketing guidebook. That's available in the resources section of your charity portal. It gives you a bit of insight into how to post and the types of posts and social media channels that you could use. We also have a key messages guide to help you tailor your messages for your social media, as well as some social post assets that you can use. If you are completely new to Canva, you're not sure, there are some there available that you can make use of. But of course, if you do have any issues or you're completely unsure, you can just let us know. We can set up a call and to go through it in a bit more detail if needed.
Yeah, and it can be, when you're brand new to a social media platform, it can be quite scary to hit the post button, but the worst thing that happens is you have to remove it, or yeah, don't worry, it'll be fine, go for it. Okay, very quickly, what's the Big Give email address? Who should they contact for any further support?
So it's hello@thebiggive.org.uk. I'm sure Sahil and Alex can pop it in the chat quickly, so you can copy it over.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for your questions. So we will very quickly end the session now with a celebration of what we've achieved today. So let us know in the chat one thing that you've achieved by joining today's session. Have you produced a really cool hashtag? Have you learned something about a platform that you weren't aware of before? Have you felt inspired? What are you going to celebrate from this session? Please let us know in the chat. Yeah, lots of hashtags. Feeling encouraged and validated with their ideas and planning. That's so nice to hear. We feel like a lot of the time the skills are there, and sometimes it's just hearing that, yes, you're doing the right thing, it's going to be fine. Lots of inspiration and hashtag support and support for identifying influencers. So that's really great to hear. So finally, we would love to know how you're doing now. So how are you feeling about using social media for fundraising? And there should be a poll that will appear on screen. So are you still feeling really uncomfortable? Please help. Or are we feeling significantly better? Let us know. And then maybe we can take a look at how people are feeling now. Okay, good. So we're all feeling better. That's what we like to hear. A few people still feeling that they have a long way to go. And as Beth has already said, you know, the Big Give have so many kind of really useful resources available for you. We'll be sharing the deck and the recording with you. But also it can seem scary, but once you start posting, it'll just feel completely normal. So don't worry, you will definitely get there. So final thought, please do join us tomorrow for Ask the Panel. You'll get to hear from past challenge participants. You'll also get to continue asking Beth any questions you might have about the campaign. So yeah, see you tomorrow. And thank you so much for joining us and for being so active in the chat. We always love that. So thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.